Well, good morning. We are back for round 2 today of a 4-part series on love, lust, dating, and relating. And so last week we talked a little about love. We're going to do a quick recap. Today we're going to get into a little bit of the lust and relating thing, and we'll really hit it hard next week, which is just a simple way of saying, those of you with children, just be forewarned for next week. I should have had Frank instead of Mike up here. I want to be frank this week, but really frank next week. And so just a little FYI where we might be going next week, all right? I will try my best to be frank while also being sensitive, okay? And you're going to help me later today. Everybody knows what this is, right? It's a hoe, right? A little garden utensil. It's a hoe, right? And if I have a scratch, I can use it to scratch and itch, all right? Remember those 2 words, all right? We're going to come back to them a little bit later, right? Yes, that's exactly right. We'll get there in a minute, all right? So let's do a quick review of where we're at last week. Last week, the big question was simply this: are you who the person you are looking for is looking for? Because so often we go looking for somebody, and somebody else is looking for somebody, and we meet and we think, oh, we found the right person, and we don't really consider, am I really who the person who is looking for this? And we talked about last week this idea of the right person myth. And it's a wonderful myth. It's a myth that I think all of us at some point have bought into, and sadly some of us cling to it still today. And the real person myth simply goes like this: when I meet the right person, everything will be right. I mean, I want to find the right person because everything's going to be all right. And we go out looking for the right person so everything will be all right with us, and we find somebody who's looking for the right person so everything will be all right with them, and we think, oh, we found each other, and this is the right person. And we said last week that the reason we think they're the right person is simply because of this: chemistry. And we don't ever think about, the other aspects of being right with somebody. I don't have to think, well, I don't have to work on being kind, because when I meet the right person, they will never do anything that will cause me not to be kind to them. I don't have to worry about developing the skill of patience, because when you meet the right person, you never, ever have to worry about being patient with them. Right? Everybody say, wrong. You need to know that. But it's something we buy into. It's something we believe even though we don't believe it. And the reason we're going to spend these next couple of weeks after today continuing on this thing is that what I've discovered over the course of my life is that a lot of stuff that seems like kind of a dumb moment, at least for me, it seems like, doesn't everybody know that? Not everybody kind of knows this, or at least not everybody really understands it all. And you single people, this is directed at single people today and the next couple of weeks. And so you married people, you can just sit back because you will be laughed at occasionally through this thing, but it's simply to warn them and to say, there are some things you can do now and that you ought to be doing now that will prepare you so well for what's later. And so often we buy into the idea, well, when I get there, then I'll get it all fixed. And I want you to know, young folks here and single people, whatever ages, now is the time to consider who you are. Because the reality is, it's not only about finding the right person. That's important. It's about finding, but it's not only about that. It's also about becoming the right person. And that's what we focused on last week, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And I'm specifically going to talk to the single guys in the room. So that's where my focus is going. And a little disclaimer as we start: I'm not here to hammer you today. I'm not here to try to make you feel guilty or bad. But the reality is, you may feel like that as we go through today. All right? But I want you to know, I'm telling this because I love you and I care about you. And I want you to become the right person, to be in that process of becoming, so that when you do find the right person, you are ready to enter into a relationship and not just into chemistry with them. Because what happens is, we have this great chemistry, this, oh, I'm in love, I can't stop thinking about each other. She says, all I can do is think about him. When he's with her, he says, all I can do is keep my mind on her. It's this kind of, oh, it's so wonderful. Nobody's ever loved like this before. We have our own theme song. There's music that plays in the background, the soundtrack, as you see each other. And you really, really believe that nobody has ever loved like this before. And you may find yourself sometimes in that relationship and your mom's going, honey, I think you need to step back and think about this. No, Mama, you don't understand. Or your dad says, that guy's trouble. And oh, your dad, you don't understand, because we are in love. And all that matters is that we are in love. And I want you to know, being in love is important. But you have to have more than chemistry. And chemistry will suffer at some point if that's all you have, because relationships happen. And stuff happens in relationships, and the person you said, I never have to be thoughtful. I never have to worry about not being mad at somebody, not being angry, control my temper, because they never do anything that would cause me to lose those things. It happens. And then the chemistry begins to fade away. And so that's why we're spending some time. So before we get into today's, the deep heart of it all, I'm going to ask you just to bow your heads, and let's pray one more time together, all right? Father, I ask today, as Timothy's already spoken to you this morning, that to recognize that you're here in this place. I pray that we would be open to and recognize that you are always with us, that you're always there. And it's not so much to watch over us and to look out and to write down the things that we're doing wrong, but it's because your longing is always to be with us. And your hope is that we will respond to your presence in a way that changes how we look at life, how we react to life, how we live life. And there's a lot of us here in this room today that have made a lot of mistakes on our way to through dating, our way into marriage. And we long that other people don't have to go through that same twisted, troubled path because of the things that we believed or the thoughts that we bought into or the actions that we've done. And so I just pray today that you would be especially with those that are in this room that have gone that path before, that you'd bring healing to them. And for those that are still single, still looking for somebody, that they would be open to your guidance. In your name, amen. Last week we were over in Paul in chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, which is called the love chapter, right? And we handed out this little resources you left last week that had all the list of the categories of, what love is. Love is patient, love is kind, and it goes on and on and on and on. And, I would hope that if you haven't picked up, there's some at the Ask Me Desk You Leave today. It's a great resource, and it's a great thing since I'm not going to talk specifically to you single ladies, it's a great thing for you single ladies to take that list and kind of, if you're looking for somebody to date or you're thinking about somebody or you're in a dating relationship, to kind of look, how does the person I'm dating, how do they do on this list, And if you find yourself going down the list and saying, well, they're not any of these things, that ought to be a little gentle reminder that maybe you need to think about why you're in this relationship. Not looking to blow anything up. I'm trying to guide you in a good direction, all right? So last week we talked about this chapter, and at the end of it, Paul kind of takes this turn as he talks about what love is, and he says, listen, when I was a child, I talked like a child, and we all understand that, right? When you're a kid, you talk like a kid, and I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child, and that's what kids do. They're kids. But he says, well, when I was a child that way, when I became an adult, I set aside childish ways. When I grew up, I recognized I had to move beyond those kinds of things. And so single guys today, that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about moving beyond some childish ways. Because boys, when we're boys, we get our toys, and we know that toys are things, cars to slam at each other and blow things up. And we know that they're just to kind of use and sort of abuse, and we'll get another car or another truck or another explosive, and we'll just go on to bigger and better and more dangerous kinds of things. And that's just how life goes. It's about, having fun and destroying stuff and pretending and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, we need to step beyond and sort of move beyond those childish ways. So here's the challenge I want to put out for us today. The challenge is, for all of us, reality is, in our culture, women are viewed, presented, talked about, and sung about like a commodity. That's a true statement. And that's just not our culture. And women, you are not exempt from this. Sometimes you kind of help us all out. I watch my boys go through high school and college, and, it's amazing how women communicate today than they did years ago. But the reality is, in our culture, women are viewed, presented, talked about, and sung about like a commodity. And we all know what a commodity is, right? Commodity is something that is bought, sold, traded, or used. You know, you get it, you use it, you throw it away, you get another one, you use it, and you throw it away. It's something to be used. And then get another one. And it's sad that within our society, that's how women are kind of portrayed. I mean, the line is something like this. You know, it's take me, use me, do whatever you want to do with me, and then discard me or trade me in for another one. Now, while we may not believe that's right, that is how our culture portrays it. You don't like the one you're with? Get another one. You know? You're not really interested in dating this girl, but, you know, she's interested, and so, hey, you got nothing else better to do, so have a little fun, and then, you know, I'll go on to the next thing because it's not that big of a deal, we tell ourselves. And the challenge for all of us is it's all around us. It is all around us. Now, you may hear that and think, well, that's kind of old-fashioned, Mike. It's old-fashioned that we don't view them that way. And you may say, well, nobody does it that or thinks that way anymore, that, you know, you got to treat them with a certain respect. You know, and it's just my culture, you know, it's just kind of what we do today. I want you to know something. You are probably true in that. That the thoughts I'm going to present today may be a little old-fashioned. But I want you to know something. When they were new-fashioned, they were just as much out of cultural relevance, cultural connection as they are today. See, the world in which Jesus spoke and lived is a world somewhat similar to where we're at today. Women not only were looked at and treated like commodities, they were commodities. You need to recognize that. They were commodities. There was no question. I mean, you know, you could get, slaves, but you get a woman slave, you can do anything you want with her. You could kill her and nobody would say anything to you. And there was no legal standing for women in society. I mean, in the Roman and Greek cultures, you know, in fact, there was a time, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century, that it is amazing when you look at the culture. Marriage was losing sort of its favor. Prostitution was legal. In fact, the idea of getting married and having kids and all that kind of stuff was sort of began to go out of vogue. And in fact, if you go back in history, men back in Roman and Greek times actually used prostitutes as a form of birth control. Because they didn't want to have any more kids. The more kids they had, the more they had to divide up their inheritance. So what they said, you know, we can get all the sex we want, don't have any connections, we'll just live, and when we get to a certain age, we'll find a younger male, give him our inheritance, somebody we can trust, and I'll die and I'll go to whatever happens, and they'll just kind of go along. And it was in that kind of world, a world where I mean, little girls were not valued. You had a baby daughter, you threw her in the river, or you set her out just on the street and let them die. There was no connection to them. And in that setting, this setting where 2nd and 3rd century Rome, do you know that twice before their Senate they considered a law that made it mandatory for men to get married? That ought to tell you something. It tells you that the marriage had fallen so much out of his favor, and the idea of, you know, having kids and all that kind of stuff. For what, they had to think about making laws that said, you got to do it. And it's into that kind of world that these somewhat old-fashioned, nobody thinks that way anymore kind of sayings came from. So I want you to understand that this is not just, everything was cool back then. When Jesus spoke these words, and his followers, Peter and Paul, spoke these words, they were into a world that was not just viewed women as commodities, but women were commodities. No value, no voice, no meaning. So here's the call, single men. We have been called to a different norm. And I'm hoping you will consider it with me today as we look at these verses and consider some of the implications from them. Because I believe if you will line yourself up with this different norm, it will pay off so well when that moment comes when you meet somebody and you fall in love and maybe you consider, you know, taking it to the next step at some point and getting married. It will serve you so well, but you need to think about it now, not just about it later. So over in John chapter 13, here's the setting. One of the last times Jesus is with his disciples. It's right after the Lord, in the midst of the whole Lord's Supper thing. Kind of the last meal he has before he's arrested and crucified. And as Jesus gets his guys together, John's there, and Peter and James are there, and the rest of the disciple guys are there, and he's got them all in this upper room, and he says, hey, John, You may want to get your pencil and paper out because I got something to say to you. And here's what he says to this group. Guys, I give you a new commandment. Love each other. And I wonder if maybe one of the disciples didn't raise his hands, and Jesus says, yeah, you over there, you in the back. Does that include the women? Yes, it includes the women, yes. Another question, follow-up question, yes. Does that mean a romantic love? Are we supposed to get married? He says, no, not romantic love. This is a deeper love. This is a caring love. He says, love each other. You must love each other as I have loved you. Which again, I think somebody raised their hand. You really talking about the girls too? Because remember, girls are commodities. I mean, they have no value in this thing. Yes, them too. Then he makes this incredible statement. All people, not just the people that are part of my followers, all people will know that you are my followers if you love each other. Now, we typically pass over that because we think, oh, it's about loving each other. And we don't think about the whole male-female kind of thing. But into the context Jesus was talking, he is clearly talking about women as well. That they are worthy of being loved just like us guys are worthy of being loved by God. Into that setting where, women were sort of this commodity, this second-class citizens at best. Jesus had followers that were women. Jesus has moments when he stops and shows the value of women. And Jesus will simply say, all people will know if you love each other and if you love them like I have loved you, that I've given everything for you, that I've done it all for you. And it's into that kind of setting that they begin to think, what would that look like? What would it look like to love each other, to honor each other, to respect each other, to treat everybody the same? Whether you're male, female, whether you're a freed person or a slave, whatever your ethnic background, that all of us are equal before God. Paul will pipe in Ephesians. He writes them a letter and says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Now, I have to imagine when the folks in Ephesus are reading this, they probably stop and think, love our wives as Jesus loved the church. I wonder, does Paul really realize that Jesus died for the church? Which if you read on, and gave his life for it. So yes, he means that really kind of that. And they have to be wondering, let me ask you a question. Why would you have to tell somebody to love their wife completely? Unless it wasn't the norm to love your wife with sort of the sacrificial love. What if they were just sort of a commodity that you're supposed to get married and have some kids, so, let's just get married and do this thing, and, I'll go out and do my fun, and, I don't have to. Into that kind of culture, Paul says, no, you got to love your wife. And check what Peter does. Peter's the next one we're going to go to. Peter, one of Jesus' followers. Peter, who walked with Jesus and followed Jesus and watched Jesus and observed Jesus. Peter, who saw Jesus one time talking to a Samaritan woman at this well in the heat of the day. And he and the rest of the disciples were like, what's Jesus doing? What does he think he's doing? I mean, why is he talking to her? And it's a Samaritan woman. I mean, Samaritans were like, whatever those people are for your nationality, because all of us have those people. She was one of those people. And they can't imagine, I mean, you know why you don't talk to a woman back in those days? Because they're women. There was no reason to talk to them. They were of no value. She should go out and get water and be quiet about it. But Jesus is talking, and not only was he talking to her, he was drinking from the cup that she used. Ew, cooties, right? I mean, think about it, And then they're trying to get their mind around it. And Peter and the other disciples, they watch this, they think, what is Jesus doing? Who does that? Who talks to a Samaritan? Who talks to a woman who's a Samaritan? Who drinks after a woman who's a Samaritan has drunk from a cup? And the answer from Jesus is very simple. The Son of God does. That's who does that. And in that moment, Jesus communicates something that just crosses their cultural path in such a harsh way. Because that's just hard for them to get their minds around, that you would talk to a woman. One of those people, women. And then you would drink after. I mean, But in that moment, their eyes began to think, what does this look like? I mean, this is something totally new. And Peter, years later, will write these words over in 1 Peter chapter 3. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect. Let me ask you a question. Why was this even in the Bible? Why should you have to tell a husband, you ought to be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect? There's only one reason I can think of that you would have to write this and put it in the Bible, that God would inspire this to be put in the Bible. And that would simply be because into that culture, women were not considered, and men didn't have to treat them with respect. I mean, there was a whole debate over, the rabbis over, what is sort of the line for divorce? I mean, do you really have to have a good reason, or does any reason work? Does she burn your toast? You're out of here, woman. Is that all you need, or does it have to be something more? And there was this kind of battle. No, we really got to do a little bit more. And into that setting, Peter has to say, guys, by the way, consider your wife as you live with her. By the way, treat her with some respect. And I have to wonder if some guys read this letter from Peter, they aren't going, Peter, you don't even know my wife, If you knew my wife, you may have some different counsel here, right? Then he goes on and says, treat her with respect as the weaker partner. Now, women, don't get mad at that. Simply means your husband can probably beat you at an arm wrestling contest or pick up bigger things than you. And in this cultural setting, it simply meant that you were the weaker partner because you had no standing in society. And so it was your husband's job, because he had standing, to treat you with respect, because you could stand up all you want and say, you're going to treat me with respect. And that would only get you in big trouble. So don't take offense to this. He's not saying you're, less important or inferior. In fact, the very next thing he says, treat them as a weaker partner, as heirs with you. As heirs with you of this gracious gift of life. Peter says, guys, when you look at your wife, be considerate, be treated with respect, because she is an heir with you. She's a joint heir. She is just like one of God's children, just like you're one of God's children. And you need to recognize that, because, again, there was sort of the separation. Guys are important, women, not so much, Now, Peter's saying, no, that's not the way it is. And the amazing thing is, he says, not only do you have to treat it that way, recognize that how you do this so that nothing will hinder. The word there actually means to block or stop your prayers. So somebody reads this, somebody has to say, is Peter really saying what I think he's saying? Is he really saying that God won't hear my prayers because of how I treat women? That's right. Say it again. Yeah, all right. That's serious stuff, isn't it? And married guys and single guys, you need to recognize that. How you treat women can affect how God hears your prayers. Don't ask me to explain it theologically, because I can't. It's just what it says, right? So that's why he says, listen, guys, I don't need to meet your wife. Consider her when you live together. Treat her with respect. She's not as strong, she doesn't have much status, doesn't have any status in our society, but she is a joint heir with you. And what that means is, single guys, every woman that you see face to face, every woman, the cute girl that works down at Starbucks, the one at the office that's always, hitting on you, that you're not really interested in being hit on, but that woman, the people in your neighborhoods, all those kind of, every woman you meet, your mother, your grandmother, your aunts, everybody around this building, every woman you meet is a child of God just like you. So, next time you go out on a date, here's the picture I want you to have. Picture God sitting up in heaven, smiling that you finally got a date. Go, guy. But just to remind you, son of mine, that she's also my daughter. So while you're out having a good time, just remember, I'll be up here cleaning and polishing up my lightning bolts. Just in case you happen to forget that she is my daughter. All right, let's move on from that. Now, Singles, I want you to understand. You look at this list and you say, well, I'm not married yet, Mike. I mean, that has nothing to do with me. I don't have a wife to love. I don't have a wife to, not hinder my prayers, I want you to understand that how you're living the life right now is all practice for what comes later. And what you do now will affect what happens later. I wrote these down because I didn't want to get them wrong. Listen, if you think that you can date like a slave owner, because that's what the context we were looking at, right? If you think you can date like a slave owner and then put on a tux, say I do, and magically become this guy who knows how to honor and respect a woman, you are kidding yourselves. If you think you can treat women as commodities and then find that special one and suddenly you change, you are kidding yourself. And I want you to know, I'm telling you this because I've seen too many occasions where guys kind of lived the life, kind of did their thing and thought, hey, when I meet the woman, I'm going to be swept on my feet and everything will be cool. All the stuff will get fixed. Right now, I'm just living the life. And those things happened, and they put on the tux, and they said, I do, and they thought immediately because they were the right person, everything was going to go right. And what they discovered was the past, and we've talked about it at the start of the year. The past that you thought was in the past becomes your present. It becomes your future. So let me bottom line for you guys. Guys, I want you simply to man up. And I know you can do this. One of the things we don't have in American culture that some other cultures have is sort of this transition from childhood to manhood. We don't have any animals to go out and kill and drag back, and we can all cheer that you killed the animal. There's some cultures, they got like where you get bungee jumping from, where they jump off of the rope, and if your head has to just touch around ever so slightly, that shows you've transitioned. I guess if you hit too hard, it shows that you're still going to be a child because your brain's going to be scrambled. But cultures have all these different. We don't have a great thing, but we do have this great saying, and that is to man up. And I used to have the privilege of coaching high school basketball at a couple of different places I've lived. And, there's this time in a game, Big John, where you get you guys together and say, guys, it's time to man up. Right, John? This is, we're down by this or we're up by this. We got so much time. Now is the time. And I want you to know, single men, now is the time. Because this is when you can set yourself up to win in the game. Because if it doesn't go well here, I'm not a prophet, or the son of a prophet, the son of a policeman, actually. But it will go bad later for you. And I don't want to see that happen to you. I see too many people that it's gone bad for, and I want it to go good for you. And I want you to be thinking about now becoming who you want to be later. So that's the first thing, man up. Second thing, I must renew my mind to think differently. I'm going to talk real specifically about that in a second, but that's the bottom line. You got to renew your mind. You got to step back from some stuff and rethink how you're doing some stuff. And lastly, I must make up my mind to behave differently. That's a hard one. Because we have spent our life developing patterns and habits and processes, and to change those things can be a challenge. But I want you to know, I see too many couples that come, they want to get married, and we do this whole thing around here, this premarital preparation that's called Preparing a Rich, and we say everybody that we're going to marry has to go through this, and it's a chance to kind of try to work through some stuff and bring some stuff up. But I see all this time, all this energy is put on a wedding, 6 months, even a year. Oh, it's going to have this, and I'm going to have this. We're going to have a carriage that comes down. We'll have swans. We'll have all. Oh, it's going to be like the orchestra. It's going to be this wonderful. We spend all this energy, this months or even a year prepping for this one date, and we've spent our whole life establishing patterns and habits and things that are going to destroy that. And it just seems to me, as a casual observer, that we got that all wrong. I think we ought to have a great party. I love big parties. Plan a party, but be as intentional or even more intentional on who you're becoming as opposed to just preparing for an event. All right, I've gone to meddling, so here we're going to go. Let's talk about renewing your mind. Guys, I want to talk to you about what you entertain yourself with. Everybody take a deep breath. Blow it out. And if there was ever a time for the internet to go bad, this is probably a good time for it to go bad. Guys, I want to talk to you about your playlist. And let me be as clear and straight as I can be. If you have songs on your playlist that refer to women as a garden tool, or as something I would scratch to take care of start at A, you won't have to go very far. I'm being serious about this. I know I'm trying to be somewhat sensitive. But if you have songs on your playlist that refer to them in either kind of those ways, by sundown tonight, you need to erase them and never put them back on again, all right? And here's why I say that. I want you to understand this, why this is important. Do you know that in every society, every culture, that there's ever been a genocide, every society, every culture where there's been slavery, it has always, always, always started by labeling a certain group of people a certain way, because that then allows us not to see them as humans. I mean, here's some fairly modern history. In Rwanda, the Hutus decided the Tutsis were simply cockroaches. That's what they call, they're cockroaches. And nobody wants cockroaches around, right? And so we could wipe them out because they are cockroaches. Nazi Germany. In Germany, the Nazis called the Jews rats. They were vermin. Nobody wants rats around, and so you get rid of the vermin. They were a subhuman race. It was a way to label. And we in the United States aren't great at this either. You go back to the Native Americans. You go back to slavery. You go back to the time, the years leading up to the Civil Rights Movement. You go back to today. See, labels allow us to treat them as less than people. And if you kind of keep putting that in your mind, it wears you down, and you begin to have this label, and oh man, it's just things. You say to yourself, Mike, that's just my culture. That's just how we roll today. That's just how we do things. It doesn't mean anything. It's just words in a song. It's not that big a deal. I want you to know that not all cultures are equal. Christianity has never believed that all cultures are equal. You don't even believe all cultures are equal. Because we could take and dump you in some places around this world that you would be there for about 24 hours and you would say, Mommy, take me home because I don't want to be here. I used to take kids on these mission trips, One of the great things about mission trips, not just what you accomplish down there, it's what it does for kids. I have seen kids come back from mission trips, get off the plane or the bus when we get across the border, when we land, the first spot of grass they see, fall down and literally kiss the grass. All cultures are not equal. And you need to recognize that, especially if you're going to call yourself a follower of Jesus. It gets better. What you entertain yourself with. Your viewing habits. I don't have a tool or anything to explain this. Probably good. If you know where I'm going, say yes. Okay. So I don't need to go any farther. But guys, I want you to understand. We can say that, hey, this is a guy thing. Looking at that stuff, it's a guy thing. It's been happening for a long time. I want you to know that there are married guys in this room that thought, it was just a guy thing. And have done it for years. And thought, when I meet the right person, I'm going to be swept off. I have the great chemistry, and all that stuff's going to be passed because it was just kind of, something to do while I waited for the right person. And there are guys in this room today that wish that their greatest prayer would be the chance to go back and never start that. Because your past becomes your present, and it affects your future. And here's the lessons you learn when you have those viewing habits. A real body isn't good enough. And our culture tells us that all over. I mean, anytime you see a magazine as you're checking out at the checkout stand, there isn't anybody on one of those things that hasn't been airbrushed, a lot of body work, maybe even some, damage control, accident repairs. I mean, there's been some major stuff there, right? I mean, women have to face it all the time, You can't compete with something that isn't real. And I'm not just talking about their physical body. What you're learning, the lesson you're learning is that a real body isn't good enough. That I need to see this stuff that's, and women, you aren't exempt from this. The whole romance novels, the whole stories you kind of get sucked into. Oh, my heart flutters because, this vampire, decided not to suck my blood, but he wants to make out, all this kind of. When you buy into that, when you feed your mind with that kind of stuff, what it's saying is that a real body, a real person, the whole totality is not good enough. And nobody can compete with those. And we're training ourselves to think, but it's just pretend. I know it's fake and pretend. If it was fake and pretend, we wouldn't have this right person myth that everybody in this room has believed at some point in their life, right? Second thing you're learning, one body isn't good enough. Kind of like going to the buffet. Nobody goes to the salad bar and just gets lettuce, Enough said. Third lesson. Third lesson. Her body isn't good enough. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't have a her right now. But when you have a her body won't be good enough because you have trained yourself to think about and contemplate and consider all this other stuff. I need to get a drink before we go very farther. Listen, I've heard this over and over. I have believed this myself. It doesn't hurt anybody. Mike, I'm just a single guy. I'm hanging out here. I don't have any dates, and I doesn't look like any prospects on the future, so I'm just killing some time. It doesn't hurt anybody. Who's it affecting, Here's who it's affecting. It's hurting you. Study after study keeps coming out and tells us that your viewing habits, we all understand what I'm talking about, right? Everybody say yes? Yes. If you don't, raise your hand. Good, a kid raised their hands. That's where we're doing good today. They're telling us now that your viewing habits are drug-like. That it chemically changes your brain. Most recent study, it actually rewires your brain. So don't tell me it's not hurting anybody, because it is hurting you. It is changing how your brain processes things. So it is hurting. Not only is it hurting you, it's hurting them. And them as they wide them, because it's looking at them as a commodity. See it, use it, throw it away. And maybe this third one will scare you the most. It is hurting the potential us. Now, there may not be a potential her out there right at the moment, but it has the chance to affect the potential you and her. Because the reality is, when you find that her, that potential her, and you got all this stuff in there, and those lessons that, a real body isn't enough, one body isn't enough, her body isn't enough, that's not a great way to make a relationship work. Any questions? Okay. Let's move along. What you're doing now will follow you around. We talked about it last week. I will continue to tell you that because it really is true. The other part of this whole thing is to make up your mind, to this idea of behaving differently. First way is to honor and respect all women. I'm not telling you guys anything new. You guys all know how to do this. But what I'm telling you, right now I want you to get in your mind, think about some woman in this world that you would love to meet, that you would be a great honor to meet. That if I could just have a couple of minutes with this person, I would be so honored. Maybe it's the Mrs. Obama, maybe it's Oprah, maybe it's Beyonce, maybe it's Lady Gaga. I hope that isn't it, but pick a lady that you think, if I could just spend some time, I would love, it'd be an honor to meet this person. Because you know what happened if you met that person? They walked in and you wouldn't be going, oh, baby, you looking good today. Turn around. You would not be doing that, right? That you'd be like, oh, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your eyes would be locked in eyes, that you would sit down, you'd be a gentleman, be all that kind of stuff. What you need to do is to man up and honor and respect all women. Those you like, those that like you, but you don't like them, but you know that if you kind of give them a little interest, you know, things can be fun. The ones that you hope someday to like, the old people that are always mean to you, all women, to begin to treat them with respect and honor, because what you're doing today is practice for tomorrow, which is practice for the next day. Lastly, I want to offer this as advice, and I don't think anybody will take it, but I want you to consider it. I would love for you to go home today, get out whatever way you keep your calendar, whether it's your iPhone, your iPad, your computer, maybe one of those old school pieces of paper up on the wall, and you mark February 26, 2015. And write in your calendar, resume dating. Because it may take you a year for your mind to be renewed, for your heart to be softened and changed, for a chance for all the stuff that you have put in to begin to fade away a little bit in life. And if you are man enough to do this, let me tell you what's going to happen. In about 3 months from now, you are going to meet the woman of your dreams. And you have to say to yourself, man, I made that commitment. How long was it for? 3 months is kind of close to a year. Yeah, let's just go ahead. If she is the right one, she'll wait for 9 months. But to do this for yourself. Do this for yourself, not just today, but a year from now, 5 years from now, and for some of you can't imagine this, 20 years from now. It will pay off hugely. The dividends of this will pay off hugely. See, it's not only about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. And that's what I want for you. And when I say right person, I'm not looking for a perfect person, just the right person. And by the way, guys, there are a lot of women, young and old, there are a lot of single, available women out there who think that all the gentlemen are gone. You can't find them anymore. If you will follow my suggestions, you will find yourself in a very small, exclusive group that a lot of them are looking for. Just saying, all right?